You're watching JWeekly Canada, and I'm Susan Minuk. Joining me from Los Angeles is Beth Lane, an actress, producer, writer, and filmmaker. Her award-winning documentary, Unbroken, tells the incredible true story of 7 siblings who, after their mother's death at Auschwitz, spent 2 years hiding and surviving alone in war-torn Germany. Following their father's directive to always stay together, they endured hunger, bombings, and unimaginable trauma. Their journey culminates in a heartbreaking decision to declare themselves orphans in order to escape to America, a choice that separated them for over 40 years. Welcome, Beth. As the daughter of Bella Weber, the youngest sibling, what was it like to explore your family's painful history and transform it into a film?
Well, thanks for having me, Susan. I think that when I think about Unbroken and I think about my family's history, what comes to me first and foremost is that it's a story of hope. And there's no question that they survived the unimaginable, which they did. It's so important for me to explore their history through this lens of hope, through knowing that I'm actually here talking to you, which is not a given, considering the atrocities that were happening during the 20s, 30s, and 40s, in Germany and Poland in particular. So when I've gone back to like really research the history, it was more from a place of who were these incredible silent heroes along the way who actually enabled their survival, because there had to be people to do that. It wasn't just like they were in the woods eating nuts and foraging for food all by themselves for the entire time. There were extraordinary upstanders along the way who helped them survive. And if not for them, I wouldn't be able to share this story with you. So I look at it from that lens.
Bringing such a deeply personal story to the screen, it must have been an emotional journey for you. How did you navigate the challenges, and were there moments when it felt overwhelming?
Oh my gosh. I mean, it's been 7 years in the making. We are finally at the finish line. We're so excited. But I would say the challenges, especially as a first time filmmaker, have been every single thing has been a challenge, every single one. And, from first discovering that it was my story to tell, I never felt it was. I felt it was my mom's or my aunt's or uncle's. And when I made that decision, it was like, do I have their blessing? Well, yes. So I got their blessing. And then how am I going to make this movie? I've never made one before. So that was a challenge that I had to overcome. How am I going to raise the money to make this movie? And then, like, what kind of camera do you use? How do I actually secure the interviews? It goes on and on and on. And then, of course, now we're in the other phase of sales and distribution and getting it out there to the world.
What a
Um,
journey.
it really has been like a PhD in movie making and story sharing in a way that from the beginning I just had no idea what I was walking into, and really thrilled that I did.
But a documentary it is a different type of film work than typical film, a typical movie, right? So when you say 7 years, I'm just needing to know, is that from inception, from when you first made that decision you're going to do this and sourcing everything out, or is this, it took 7 years to actually produce?
I mean, yes, the moment I decided to make the film was quite literally on July 21st, 2017. And there are many phases of pre-production, production, post-production. We had our world premiere on October 8th, 2023, which is Bashert. I mean, the timing of our world premiere in as it met with world politics and the massacre that
October
happened.
8th, you said. October
Yes,
8th, one day
yeah,
following. Oh my
one day. It
gosh.
wasn't even 24 hours. We didn't even know what was going on yet. Like the news had started to break, but I wasn't watching the news. I was busy with my world premiere. And and so the timing of that does not fall quietly on me. I feel that this is a moment to continue the work that we have to do to combat anti-Semitism and bigotry and hate of all kinds. And I think that to answer your question about the 7 years, though, every phase, it's kind of like an athlete that's going to the Olympics. There are all these different phases along the way that actually get you to the finish line. And right now, we're at the finish line. So yes, it's been 7 years to get from inception to finish line. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so moving on, we've got the seven. The seven Weber siblings are the only known family to have survived the Holocaust together. That's significant. A journey defined by resilience, unity, and survival. So how did you approach telling their story while honoring the legacy? Describe that for me.
They are the only known family of seven to have survived together and to have emigrated from Germany to America together. And because of the significant nature of them being the only family, their photograph actually hangs in the last gallery of the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington, D.C. So the significance of that, I think my family never truly understood. And it inspired me to find out more about how is it that they are the only family, and what was it that made the Holocaust Museum take note of who they were. I think Unbroken has also given the Holocaust Museum a lot more information than they ever would have had, because I took it and did a deep dive on really trying to unearth what it was about my family that survive the odds. How did they overcome the odds? And it's so unusual that it has to be celebrated.
So I love how you involved the surviving Weber family members in the production. What was it like revisiting their memories and hearing their firsthand accounts?
I think it was very challenging for them. And it was something that I wanted to be really sensitive to. My Aunt Ruth in particular, she's just a rock star in the movie, and you see the forward facing person, but when the cameras are off and when I would leave her home, I would get phone calls from her son, my cousin, to just let me know, she's doing okay, but it's a rough week. She's having nightmares. It's a very delicate and challenging experience, because that this is going on inside of them, even though she's just so incredible, cracking jokes and telling stories, and her survival mechanism is humor. And it was a privilege to be on the receiving end of that. And each of them are very, very different. My mom is an open book, but doesn't really have the memories.
But you had to maybe refresh them, or how did you even do that? What was the creative process?
Yeah, for us, because I kept hoping to try and get newer and more memories from her, that didn't happen. But we would do things like I would do her hair, or we would play Scrabble, or we would go for a walk. And so I would use those interview techniques as opposed to just sitting and talking, or we were going through photo albums and things. We always had an activity involved.
I love that.
Yeah. And I
it really worked well in the film.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
For Mom, even going back to Germany and even seeing the film as many times as she has, it's not like new memories are coming up for her. But I took the ones that she had that we knew we couldn't recreate, and we animated them. So I think that process for her has been really fascinating, to see how we animated her memories so that we could actually see her story through the lens of a child.
Very nice. And I also like how in the film too, their extended family, you've got the siblings that were there, and then their kids, and I'm thinking grandkids perhaps. I'm assuming maybe you were already close with everybody, but that surely brought everyone together.
It has brought everybody together. And no, I would not say I was close with everybody. I was meeting some of my first cousins for the very first time.
Oh, that's wonderful.
So what you actually see, even if I had met them once, and perhaps I did in the 1990s when we had a 50th anniversary of their emigration to America, family reunion, there were so many of us there, and I had just given birth to twins, and I'm sure we met, but didn't actually get to break bread together in their homes. And I didn't grow up with my German family, so meeting them really on camera for the first time is something that I look at each time I see the film, and I'm like, wow, this is amazing that I have all these family members and that together we share this legacy. And each one of us is actually taking what we've learned from the journey in many different ways. And some of them are really engaged with the film and like show up to all the screenings and are, banging the drum and letting everybody know about our releases. And some of them actually have a little bit more arm's distance, and that's perfectly fine. I think we all walk into the story when we need to.
Right. Okay. I'm sure this is beautiful for their legacy to hold on to these memories and to know about them if they didn't already. So how did you go about gathering information for the film?
I mean, oh gosh. So, our pre-production took place when I was at UCLA getting my master's degree. I was enrolled, and it was in between my second and third year of my master's studies that I decided to make the movie. So it was wonderful to actually have the resources of UCLA at my fingertips to begin doing some original, some research, and then really having the academic integrity to make sure that I was finding original source documents and things like that. And I jam on that stuff. Like, I really enjoy kind of taking a deep dive in the archives, so that by the time we were really cobbling the film together and needed to do more research to really fill out the pieces of history, the pieces of archival, and all of the graphics, we were in COVID lockdown. So I didn't get to actually go to many of the libraries or the archives to do the kind of work that I would have done. So we did it all online. And I kind of hired an army of other academics to really help me dig. My editor at that time, a woman named Dina Gutman, did a fantastic job of digging. My associate editor and one of my UCLA classmates, Leah Leonard, she did an extraordinary amount. And then we had an archival producer who also helped us. And then you reach out to all the different museums and you let them know what you're looking for. And those curators and archivists help and deliver content. And then you sift through it and see what's germane and what could possibly work for us. It was an exciting time. I think the most significant piece of information that I learned that I just wasn't expecting was this incredible archivist in Budapest who discovered my mother's birth mother's family heritage, which none of us had ever been able to find before. And my uncle, who was a renowned physicist, had gone to Budapest to research and found nothing. And so when this curator found all of my birth grandmother's siblings, her parents, the whole thing, that kind of blew me off my seat, I have to say.
How fascinating. And what was your mother's response to that?
I mean, they all were floored, just completely gobsmacked by it. And it made us understand how deeply rooted we are in Hungary and Budapest. And so we actually went to visit. And of all the places that Mom and I have gone to visit in the world together, I think that visiting the river and the exhibit that the city of Budapest has in honor of the victims of the Nazi terror is one of the most moving and extraordinary memorials in the world. And it gave her a moment to really pause and reflect on the miracle of her life.
So how has this journey, uncovering and sharing your family's history, transformed you personally and creatively?
My mother never refers to herself as a Holocaust survivor. She doesn't refer to herself as someone who's persecuted. She doesn't refer to herself as a refugee. So I didn't grow up with that.
But she is, right? So
yes, she is.
Why wouldn't she identify that? Did she block that out, or she just...
When my mom came to this country, she was adopted by a wonderful family, my grandparents, Roz and Josh Spiegel, who were extremely educated and sophisticated people who gave her a life of education and the arts and an enormously wonderful family, most of whom all live in Toronto. My grandfather was born in Thunder Bay and was a neurosurgeon in the army and wound up stationed in Cleveland and then eventually to Chicago. So our roots are in Canada, no question about it. My family still lives in Canada. My uncle still owns property in Northern Ontario. Yeah, I grew up there every summer of my life. So for my mother, it was and for all of the siblings, they all wanted to move forward with their lives and not dwell in the past. Their survival mechanisms were to move forward. And so the thing that I've discovered about myself, most importantly, through this journey is because my mom had never referred to herself that way, I never referred to myself as a 2G survivor or even somebody who was the recipient of, for example, intergenerational transfer of trauma. And I do now. But the way that I've chosen to actually cope with that and grapple with it is through the arts, and specifically by sharing stories of hope, because I've led a wonderful life.
I'm also wondering what it was like for, the family to be separated for 40 years and then to reconnect. I mean, that in itself is a story just on its own.
Did
they know? They didn't know really of each other, or maybe there was some fragments of memory?
No, they did. I mean, my mother was adopted and she was having a very hard time acclimating to her new family. So the Jewish Children's Bureau of Chicago had a social working team who advised my grandparents to sever ties between my mom and her birth siblings. And at the time, 1946, that was the prevailing sentiment, the psychological sentiment of the day, that that's what one should do. I'm not sure we would do that today. However, the other 6 siblings all remained in touch. I think their reunion after 40 years, welcoming my mom, Bela, back to their family for them was an extremely emotional and beautifully shattering experience. It's something that it's difficult to put into words. And because I am not one of the 7 siblings, I can't speak for them. But I think you actually see that reunion in the movie. It's there. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Very special. What do you hope audiences take away from Unbroken, especially in today's world where stories of resilience are more important than ever?
Silence is complicity. It just is. The most important thing that people can do as a takeaway from this film is to truly appreciate that we are all human beings. We are all one. We might have differences of opinion. We might have different politics. We might have different religions, cultures. At the end of the day, it just doesn't matter. It's important that we listen to each other, but it's also important that we speak out and that we not allow any person to be bullied because of who they are. Every human being has a right to exist. And not every organization has a right to exist, because some organizations, as we are discovering, are spewing vitriol and hate. And that's not acceptable. And so we have to speak up about that. And so my hope is that people leave Unbroken feeling like they have had the opportunity to experience empathy and compassion. And perhaps they might be inspired to have more empathy and more compassion for someone who is either different than they are or just doesn't have the resources that you have to get ahead in the world. So what is it that we can do? What small act of kindness? We can't all hide 7 siblings, right? But what small act of kindness can we do on a daily basis to help somebody else on their journey? It's not always about us.
So Beth, in the film, you ask a nun whether bravery and courage are traits people are born with or something that they can learn. What are your thoughts?
I mean, I think it's why I ask so many people that question. And I grapple with it all the time. Could I do for another family what Arthur and Paula Schmidt did for my mother and her family? I don't know. And I think that courage and bravery is something, I think it is a muscle that we have to practice and exercise the same way that athletes, have a routine. Ballet dancers have a ballet bar, musicians practice scales. And so as an artist, my goal was to make a film that gives audiences an opportunity to practice those muscles of empathy and compassion, all in service of that question, would you hide me? So that we can be ready for that moment one day and have the courage and have the bravery to do what we know as a human being is ethically moral and something that we must do. So it's not necessarily an intellectual decision. It's something that comes from our gut.
Yeah, I like how in the film you talked to a few students or young people and presented them with, that question and hearing their responses so genuinely was a lesson there, really.
Aren't they amazing? I love how honest they were. My goal with the film mushroomed to this place where I've established my own 501c3, my own nonprofit here in the state of California called the Weber Family Arts Foundation. And the mission of the foundation is to combat anti-Semitism, bigotry, and hate of all kinds for any genocide, but specifically through the arts and specifically by stories of hope. So we're excited to Unbroken is our first project, and we're excited to eventually one day give seed money to other artists, whether it's poetry or dance or filmmaking or theater, so that they can continue this conversation of what it means to be an upstander and do good in the world, pay it forward.
That's a great message. Very, very inspiring. If you can share a message with your mother, Bella, and the other Weber siblings, what would you want them to know through this film?
Well, considering that my uncle Alphonse passed away before I started making the movie, then my aunt Senta was in hospice and died right when I began principal photography. And so Senta knew that I was about to make the film, but she certainly had no idea. It was such early stages. She had no idea that it was going to become the film that it is today. And of course, Alphonse had no idea. And so what I would want them to know, and now my Aunt Renee has passed away, my Aunt Ruth has passed away, I would want them to know that their story is speaking to so many people of all generations and of all religions and cultures. And I want them to know that their lives have inspired people to want to stand up and take action and speak out when needed. It's something that they didn't intend to do, but their journey has inspired this. And I want them to know that their legacy will now last in celluloid, heaven forever and ever and ever. It's something that I think beginning the journey, I just didn't think about or realize, and the blessing of it coming to this stage, having a distributor like Greenwich Entertainment to get it out there into the world. That's amazing. That's absolutely incredible to have that kind of an engine behind this story. And I'm so grateful because they deserve it. They deserve to have their story known.
And thankful to you for putting it all together, because as you said, it took a long time, a lot of work. So do you have plans to bring Unbroken to educational institutions, and how do you envision these screenings fostering conversations and inspiring hope for a better future?
There's no question that I want Unbroken to live in every single educational institution globally. No question about it. And even though it's not an educational film, it absolutely can be used as an extraordinary tool to teach empathy and compassion, to teach World War II history, to teach just human behavior. And we have plans. I've been partnering with Facing History and Ourselves, and we haven't quite, because with filmmaking, you kind of do this windowing. So we're after we have our theatrical release and we're also having our video on demand release at the same time, then I'll be able to turn my attentions toward all the different educational platforms. Pittsburgh Teen Screen wants to get us out there into all the different schools. Gosh, there are a handful of other educational institutions. The Butterfly Project is something that I was just introduced to in Charlotte, North Carolina last week at a screening. So we are really excited about
and now you've got Canada, us Canadians who are going to be invested, whether it's through synagogues or whether, there's lots of platforms we can.
There are so many different ways. Like people can just go to my website, bethlane.com, or the Greenwich Entertainment website, and you can book the film for commercial screenings, educational screenings, community screenings. Like we can go absolutely anywhere and everywhere now. And that's really, really exciting. And then the other thing that was really cool, yesterday I had a meeting with some archivists with United Nations, the educational arm of it in Budapest. And so we're partnering now together to do some tremendous work with their students over in Budapest, which is really, really exciting. So yes, that's absolutely my goal, and we welcome any kind of support in that regard. So please visit the WeberFamilyArtsFoundation.com and help us become part of our tribe.
We'll do, absolutely. So Unbroken is set to hit theaters, this month. So don't miss, everyone watching, don't miss this powerful, inspiring story. And Beth, wishing you all the best, and thank you so much for being my guest today.
Thank you so much for having me on, Susan. It's been a pleasure. I'm really honored to be part of this conversation with you, and I can't wait to bring the movie to Canada. It'd be great.
Thank you. Thank you so much.